Hello, welcome to today's class. Our topic for today is Sprites in action. At the end of today's class, you will be able to create an interactive animation using events. You will also be able to develop programs that respond to timed events and user inputs. So before we dive right into the lesson, let's take a look at some new words for today's class. The very first word we're going to review together is events. Do you know what events are? Event is an action that causes something to happen. So in computer science, when we talk about events, we're referring to an action that causes something to happen. Now let's take a look at some of the importance of using events in our program. Events make it easy to change what happens over time as your program runs. So we use an event to make the sprite begin a new behavior after some time has passed. Events also make it possible to create programs that are interactive. So we use an event block to change the sprite size, position, or rotation when the user presses a key. So these are some of the importance of using events in our program. Now let's take a look at the second new word for today's class. The second word for today's class is algorithm. Algorithm is a list of steps to complete a task. Algorithm is a list of steps to complete a task. So now we are going to watch an overview of the lesson Sprites in Action. Listen carefully, and afterwards we're going to head over to the code studio.
Now that you've learned how to use Sprite Lab, you're going to want to make your program react when someone plays with it. To do that, you're going to use events. An event tells your program to listen for something to happen and then react right away. Some examples of events are listening for a mouse click, an arrow button, or a tap on the screen. Blocks like when key pressed and at seconds are called event blocks. The code connected to an event block runs when the appropriate action is detected. For example, here's a program I started with a wobbling sprite. If I attach another sprite begins block to the at seconds event, my sprite can begin a new behavior after a certain number of seconds have passed. I can also use actions like the change block with events like the when up arrow pressed block. Now, each time the user presses their up arrow, my sprite gets bigger. Notice that event blocks don't snap into your main program. Instead, they create little programs of their own. Remember that behaviors go until you tell them to stop. If you don't want multiple events to combine behaviors, you'll need to use one of the stops blocks. Other events you'll learn will let you make different things happen when two sprites touch on the screen, or when the user clicks a sprite. Using events, you can create imaginative programs and interactive worlds. Give it a try.
In this lesson, we're going to learn more about moving and controlling our sprites and events, other ways to trigger actions and behaviors. Let's dive in. This is code.org. Awesome. So for these guys, make sure you are focused, because once you click an answer and hit run, your answer is submitted to your teacher. If I'm your teacher, that's me. So just make sure you are focused, and let's read through this carefully. Read the code. All right, so when run, set the background color to green. Okay, so when I click run, the background must set to green. Then what happens? Because code always runs in order. Make a new soccer ball sprite at 75, 200. Oh yeah, so that looks like where we print that soccer ball. Sprite soccer ball begins to spin to the right. Okay, so left, so it must spin this way. Interesting. Oh, but it doesn't move yet. Okay, it begins to move to the east. And what's the east? We'll never eat. So it must spin and move this way. Let's take a look at our options. The sprite will just spin. No, we also have move. It will just nope. The sprite will spin and move at the same time. We'll first spin and then move later. Well, I don't see a stop here, right? Sprite begins, sprite begins. Code or in computers will only do what we tell them. So the sprite will spin and move. There's no stop. And if you're not getting this, make sure to go back, pay attention. You really want to understand this, not just click an answer. But onward. And a video, we can just keep going here. First, let's practice what you learned in the last lesson. Okay, do this, make a sprite. That we got, so I'm going to go over here to sprites and click and make new. Okay, yep, and I'll just drop it right there. Ooh, cool. Set the sprite's size. Oh, so we got a new sprite here, right? And of course we can change it up, have fun with that. Set the sprite size. So where would that be? If I go into here, oh, set sprite, right? Now, keep in mind, you have to make this before you set it. So if you're like, but mister, I have this size set, and of course you need it on the whatever you chose. I have the size set, but, uh-oh, it needs to go, underneath the line, because it doesn't know what we're talking about. Now watch, if I have this line above it, boom, it knows which sprite we're talking about, because now the computer runs, sets the background, we make the sprite, then we set the size. We can't set the size before the sprite's even made. Okay. Begin any behavior. Well, cool. Let's head over to behaviors. I'll drag this out and click. And I need to pick mine since I chose yellow. Behaviors. I'm going to do jittering. I just need to make sure it all clicks in here. Awesome. Onward. All right, click here to open a category. Okay. Timed events. Events make it easier to change what happens over time as your program runs. Use an @seconds event to make Sprite begin a new behavior after some time has passed. Yeah, so an event is something that occurs in code. Now, if you don't have this, you should, right? So this is what we started with, and we can test it out. Boom, right? All right, add an @3 second event block to your workspace. Okay, so I'm just going to head over here, events, and I'll drag this out. Notice we can't click this anywhere, right? It doesn't snap in. It's on its own, because once this occurs, it's going to run its own code. It doesn't automatically run when we click run. It has to wait 3 seconds. Connect a sprite begin block under the event. So it doesn't connect to anything, but there's something we can connect to it. So let's do a behavior. Sprite begins, click, snapped right there. Now @3 seconds, our sprite, and I guess we can pick a second behavior. I'm going to say move north. Boom. So @3 seconds, sprite bloop moves north. Let's give this a shot. So notice this timer, it automatically jitters, but then @3 seconds, this runs. Pretty cool. Onward. Key events. Events make it possible to create a program that are interactive. Use the when blank pressed event block to change the sprite's size, position, or rotation. Yep. So when run, it's not really an event, but when we run, when I hit run, right, stuff happens here. Now we're going to use an event when blank pressed. So events, and this is similar to what we just did in the last, right? Notice when whatever up, notice there's no way I can connect this to anything. And that's because it's its own thing. This isn't going to automatically occur when I hit run. That's why I can't connect it here. There's a different event, there's a different thing I have to do. So when up is pressed, sure. Let's see, when up is pressed, and we can pick. When down is pressed. And then sprite size, position, or rotation. Okay, so I'm going to go to what? Sprites. And I'll change its size. You could do any of these, right? Position, change size by, ooh. So instead of setting it to a single size, I'm going to change it by 10, maybe. And then location, we could, for a location, move the sprite, or rotation. Lots of different stuff. I'm going to go with size, though. Okay, there's our sprite, change size by 10 when down is pressed. Let's see. So when I click run, nothing. But now, oh, I increased it. So maybe I should have the up key. Cool. Onward. Switching behaviors. If you want to switch from one behavior to another, you need to stop the old behavior and begin the new behavior at the same time. You can use a new block to make sprites stop their current behavior. Sprite blank stops. You'll need to connect a behavior to this block, such as moving east. Yeah, computers can only do what we tell them. So right now we have some code here. Let me test it out. Oh yeah, does all sorts of stuff, right? We make a new, the sprite begins to move east. Okay, so do this. Run the code, done. Add a behavior to each stops and begins block to make the sprite change from moving east to moving west at 2 seconds. So notice we have this event here. At 2 seconds, sprite stops what? So we need to stop moving east. Okay, well let me go over. Oh, yep, there we are. And then what do we need to start? Well, moving west. So at 2 seconds. Boom. Victory! Opposite behaviors. Some behaviors do opposite things like moving east/west, growing and shrinking, spinning right, spinning left. If a sprite has two opposite behaviors, it might seem like the sprite isn't doing anything at all. Oh yeah, that's because the computer would try to do both at the same time. Run the code and see what happens at 3 seconds. Well, let's take a look. We set the background, make this sprite, and we say sprite spin left. Alright, so that all happens the second we hit run. Then after 3 seconds, we ask the sprite to spin right. So the computer is going to be doing after 3 seconds both spinning right and spinning left. And so it will technically do it, but we're not going to be able to even tell because it's doing it both at the same time. Okay, so use the block to stop the old behavior. Okay, so add a sprite stops block under the event. Alright, so before we begin this behavior, I'm going to stick my stop here. So behaviors, sprite, stops, and then make sure it clicks in here. After 3 seconds, we're going to stop spinning left, I guess. So behaviors, spinning left. And now, once we stop this, once it's done, then let's go ahead and allow our sprite to do this. So this will happen super fast, right at 3 seconds. Stops and changes direction. Yeah. Quapow. Onward. Awesome.
Okay, this brings us to the end of today's class. See you in my next class. Bye.